Hi, Pat.
Hear us?
Hello. I can sort of hear you.
Okay, well, that's good. Something.
We're okay now.
Okay, very good. Chris is gonna.
Hi, I'm Christian.
I'm Donna.
Donna, nice to meet you.
That's Kimberly. Hi. The presentation on the buffers was really good. I think you forwarded that up to us.
Yes, well, that was, Jen Jesperson.
Yeah.
He made that, she said she couldn't come, but here, they just done that.
That's great. She's a great resource.
Was that the handbook or was it a presentation?
That was the presentation.
Okay.
She also,
I got that.
yeah, oh yeah, she also,
You sent out the slides too.
Oh, she did? No.
yeah, she sent out that, or those were the slides from the presentation, and then she also gave me the links to the handbooks.
Okay, I only read through the handbook, but it's basically the same information.
It was,
Yeah.
you just presented the slides.
Yeah, it was presented in the slides, you know, it's nice, they did a nice job
They did.
presenting.
We've admitted Chris and Lynn Geiger.
Oh, good.
Oh, great. You've got all the best people.
Yeah.
We tried.
Could you tell me everybody that's there, Pat, so I can,
Right, Chris is on mute, so I have to. There. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
We have yourself, Paul Feinberg, Lynn Geiger, Kimberly, myself, Lenny, and Tanya, Jenna Townsend.
Who?
Jenna Townsend.
Hi.
Well, she's.
Anna Townsend, right?
Not Tanya.
No,
She's
Tanya, she's Tanya's, replacement in resident.
Tanya is not there? I can't hear you. Is Tanya there today? No.
Christian Bishop.
Charlie's supposed to be calling in.
Is Lynn Geiger on Zoom?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Wait a few more minutes to, see if.
Kimberly, Kimberly's there as well?
Yes.
Lenny's there? Okay, just
Yes.
make sure who I get everybody. So I got Pat Donahue, Chris Bradley, Jenna Townsend, Lynn Geiger, Kimberly Dallas, Lenny Reich. Who am I missed?
Christian.
Christian Bishop.
Christian,
Christian Bishop.
Christian Bishop.
Chris Bishop, okay.
I know that sound isn't great.
Yeah.
The one mic is trying to do it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Hans just joined us too.
Hans is in.
Is that usually bigger? Yeah. We have 3 people on Zoom also,
Oh, okay.
and we're waiting for.
Really, we're waiting for Charlie.
I'll text Charlie and
Just to see if he wants to.
and see if you remind him, he might have forgotten.
But we can start the meeting and address the minutes from the last meeting without
Yes.
Charlie.
Let's do that. Has everybody had a chance to review the April 9th, 2024 minutes?
Yes.
Not I, but
No,
I didn't have them,
didn't.
so please, I'll pass.
Yes. Are there any edits or concerns? Do I have a motion to approve? Kimberly Dallas, motion approved, all in favor?
But there was a correction to that Christian Bishop is not a member of the committee. He's the Belgrade Lake and Natural Resources Committee. He's a member of the sort of ad hoc ordinance committee. So that
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll make that.
maybe we can make that correction.
Yeah, thank you.
Apparently I didn't read it real close. I read the general part. I did.
We have a motion to accept it with the correction that we made.
Motion to accept it with that correction. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're all set. Chris, to begin our discussion of the vegetative buffer, would you like to?
Charlie asked if you can send him a Zoom link. It was in the agenda, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's in the agenda on the town website.
So, okay. In the agenda on the town website?
Yes.
Yeah. It's in the agenda I sent out on Sunday, and it's also on the town website.
But the town, if I say it's in the agenda on the town website, is that correct?
I sent the agenda to everybody.
No, but I'm just asking you, is that the right thing to say to Charlie? It's in the agenda on the town website, or is that not correct?
It's it's two things. It's in the town website
Okay,
under Lakes and Natural Resources Committee.
okay, I see. Okay. Okay, gotcha.
It was also in the email that Pat sent to Charlie Bader this morning at 10:16.
Yeah,
Mhm.
That's the link to the town website, to the agenda, which then has the Zoom link on it. Seems to work well.
yeah.
Isn't technology wonderful? Makes us so much more efficient.
Yes,
How's your-
especially when you do.
how's your
lots-
knee?
My hip
Hip,
hip
oh,
replacement yesterday, it's okay. So, yeah, not bad.
Medicines, keep it, you're clear-headed with all the medicine?
I wouldn't go that far, but, enough to get through this meeting, I hope.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we have a competent, mind.
Yeah,
I'm sure half of your mind is more competent than a lot of others, but okay. great.
that's nice to think of, but yeah, I've seemed to be okay. Nothing too bad. So Pat, did you want to start this or am I?
Why don't you? We've
Oh.
done the,
Okay,
the new-
since I haven't really prepared for this today, wasn't sure I was gonna make it, but yeah,
Oh,
so I guess we need to on the discussion topics and ideas, 2-pager that I sent and then resent, and then looking at the other stuff that Lenny had sent, which was very helpful. I guess, I'm not sure. I don't have, I really didn't set out today to have this, to have a clear direction as to what I wanted to do on vegetative buffers. So I guess I'll open it up to anybody who has a strong feeling, of what they've learned by looking at this and what we may be able to do, to make changes that might be, necessary to the ordinance.
Well, it
Anybody?
appears to me, thank you. It appears to me that a vegetative buffer is very valuable and critical and is something that we should sanction in our discussions. And the question that I think Pat put to Hans the other day is whether and how we could require a vegetative buffer at all in the ordinance. And there's obviously lots of problems in grandfathering it and how you define vegetative buffer in terms of size and location. But it seemed like in the material that we saw, there was some material from, I think, the state of Vermont, which showed different buffers for different uses and different kinds of conditions. So I wanted to just open it up to, because I think that's pretty critical to whether or not, how our committee feels about trying to initiate the idea of having a requirement of a vegetative buffer.
I think we absolutely should have a requirement, at least go in that direction, trying to get support from that. Now, there's a long process to go through and then ultimately a town vote, but I think that's critical for our water quality.
Yeah, it seemed like from what we read, it was very important. Maybe Lynn, do you have any thoughts on how important a vegetative buffer is and what an optimum distance from the lake that buffer would be if we were to institute it?
Yep. So the vegetative buffer is the last line of defense against stormwater runoff getting into the lake. And it's very important in terms of habitat, food sources for creatures, and pollution filtration. The different use case that Paul mentioned, that was how different environmental factors are affected by different buffer depths. So a minimum depth of, I mean, any buffer is better than no buffer. The
Right.
deeper your buffer, the better it is. And the more different ecosystem services it will provide. It also depends on the type of buffer. So a mature forested buffer will do more for the environment in a smaller depth than a meadow buffer. But a meadow buffer can still provide a lot of the pollutant remediation and habitat that the forested buffer could have. So it depends.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and properties are different as
Mhm.
well. The slope of the property would make a difference, and
Exactly.
probably the soil, type of soil that's there, and but it seems like we ought to be heading toward at least a no mow, no cut, and then which I think would be, it would, I mean, I don't think we can, I personally don't think we can have grandfathered situations anymore. I don't think that I think we've got too much at stake, with the water quality to say that, well, somebody that put in a lawn in 1960 is fine to have it in 2024 because the quality of the lake, I've been in the lake since 1956, and it's changed. Everybody says it's changed. We've seen it technically our lake, Great Pond has changed, so. So it seems to me that, we can't say that, well, because you put something in back then, that it's okay today. I think we have to be more aggressive if we're gonna protect our lake.
Yeah,
So Lynn, what's the most grievous situation? Is what Chris is talking about the most grievous in terms of having lawn up to the edge of the lake? I mean, is that the worst situation?
the
Mm.
worst situation would be to have bare dirt all the way
Bare
up
dirt.
the lake.
Right.
Lawn is better than bare dirt, but the no mow zone is a lot better than just a shortcut lawn.
But,
If-
but
if
maybe we,
If we're
maybe
gonna,
we need to have require, plantings, because you could have, a construction site, an old construction site with bare dirt or
Mhm.
some sort of a, gravelly surface that's not growing any grass on it, and that would be very damaging for the lake. So maybe we need to incorporate some sort of a vegetation
So it
plant.
shows everybody, not just the speaker.
Yeah,
View
do
this,
this on-
view this gallery, view would be gallery.
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
So I'm your Lake Smart person from Friends of Messalonsky. We did a watershed survey a couple of years ago. And the result of that was that the phosphorus problems that are in Messalonsky, 51% of the problems come from lawns. And so basically what I've been doing, and you're right, every property is really different, is going and meeting with each individual person and trying to help them assess the situation at their house. But I think the most important thing that we could do, even if we have to do something bottom line, is express some sort of idea of what a buffer is and how it will benefit the lake. So maybe we don't have to define the width and the length of it, but some sort of a vegetative situation that's going on along the edge of it would be critical. So, and by sharing with people the results of a survey, really does give people specific and scientific information that explains why we want to do this. People really don't understand how water falling off the roof can run off and really bring a lot of phosphorus into the lake. So, I realize I'm yelling because I'm looking at those.
No, that's good, because the microphone is over there.
No, that's very good. Thank you. We can hear that nicely. I think we're all yelling.
Yeah, yeah.
Jenna, I agree with you and I thank you for that information.
Yeah.
But our committee our focus is not on education. We are here, our job is to deal with the ordinance. And what we're trying to consider is how we could change the ordinance to make the ordinance come closer to best management practices. So the question sort of, in my mind, is what can we suggest as an ordinance that would work? And I guess Chris is suggesting a no mow zone. And, and I guess the new idea is to have it not grandfathered, that's going to be applicable to everybody. And if that were the case, how wide should the no zone be? And does that depend on slopes or not slopes? How could we implement the idea of a no mow zone?
According to Lake Smart, the width is 10 feet, which is a lot. But that's basically what Lake Smart requires. I don't know that we need to require anything as wide as that.
I would say 10 feet would be the minimum.
Yeah.
In order to get proper nutrient removal, you want a minimum of 50 feet, but you can't ask people to give up 50 feet of their lawn.
Well,
Well,
especially,
for example,
I would argue that we have to ask people to give up 50 feet of their lawn, that we are not in a position of allowing more runoff phosphorus to enter the lake because it's going to ruin it for everybody. So it's one of those situations where, and I think it was in one of the documents we read, maybe it was on the septic from the book that Lenny sent around, but yeah, it's your impact. It's not like it's just my land. I'm going to do what I want with it. Your land is impacting everyone else's enjoyment. It's a unique situation. It's different from having a land in the woods where, you know, you can, let's argue that you could do anything you want, perhaps, because I've got land that I have tilled in some cases, and now I'm going to no-till, but it doesn't, where I've tilled, any soil that runs off doesn't enter a stream. It doesn't go so far. It all is contained in the woods that are surrounding what I'm tilling. So that's a different situation, I think, than being on a lake where you're affecting everybody else. So I think that we have to wrestle with it as a committee, what we're going to recommend to the planning board and the select board, and there's going to have to be a lot of education. I would imagine the planning board is pretty cognizant of the issues. Maybe the select board needs more education. And then it has to pass the voters, and they need to be educated as well on how important this is. So I'm just feeling that because of the impairment in the lakes in Belgrade, we need to be aggressive, and that this is the start. We develop an ordinance that we think we can stand up and talk to the planning board and the select board about and help people educate. Then I would think we get BLA and Seven Lakes behind us to educate the voters in the town of Belgrade to accept this. And it may not happen the first time we do that, which would be probably 2025, you know?
Don't forget, the Friends of Messalonsky and McGraw Pond Salmon Lake Association in there as well.
Right. No, I mean, I'm just speaking of what I know. So, yes, all the lakes associations that would be relevant, I would hope would get behind this and help us educate and it's really the voters of the town of Belgrade. It's not, you know, a lot of the I know BLA personally and Seven Lakes, a lot of the focus of the membership is on the lakes, you know, which is natural. But I think we got to go take this message and run with it to the town of Belgrade voters.
Chris, I'm not disagreeing with the concept, but we gotta keep in mind that there's a lot of property owners that might only have 20 feet of frontage in front of them or 30 feet total.
I'm
and
one of them.
Certainly wouldn't have 50 feet even if you wanted to. And then there's the folks who, you know, only have a rocky shore right in front of them. And so whatever ordinance there's gonna be, there's obviously, or recommend to be, there's gotta be not only allowances for that, because of those unique situations. We can't go in and say, well, you only got 10 feet, so you can't live there anymore. We gotta tear it down and put 50 feet. We're not gonna say. So I understand what you're saying. I disagree. I think 10 feet to me is where we should start, not 50 feet. And even then, I think we might have a fair amount of pushback, but like you said, it does take education. So if we try to go all in and make recommendations that immediately a good percentage of those folks who don't qualify, they're gonna say, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then we're gonna have a lot of legal issues. There is grandfathering legal issues. So I don't think that personally we should try to go for the full. I think that there's a good 10 feet, might be something I could go along with, but we've got to account for all those folks who have less than 25 feet.
No, I understand that. My family's place in Rome is probably the corner of the porch is 8 feet from the water. It's all, you know, there's no lawn there. It's all trees and you know, shrubs and blueberry bushes. But I think we would need to provide in the ordinance for exceptions, you know, people who cannot comply. And we're not talking about tearing down any buildings. We're talking about a vegetative buffer. And so I think there's got to be a way that we can make an exception for people who can't qualify for that. And I'm not sure what that would be, but.
Well,
Yeah.
well, Chris,
there has to be-
let's,
there has to be
what
a-
are we talking about? We're talking about a no-mow zone, not a vegetative buffer, are we?
Well, you know, Lynn said that was minimal, in the approach. So I think I would think for us to accomplish protection of the lakes, we would need to go beyond that to some sort of vegetative buffer that would have to be where, and this is, I mean, I think we're able to talk blue sky, talk about what we'd like to go for. We may end up compromising down the road, but let's find out, how do you write an ordinance that would accomplish having a real vegetative buffer rather than just a no-mow zone?
And the other comment I'd like to make, because my property is non-conforming, and so
Right.
basically, everything on our property is non-conforming, and so you don't need really exclusions. I think that's part, I'll refer to Hans, but that's part of getting permits with the planning board is based on what your lot is. So you can't, there's no way on our property you could have 50 feet of buffer. It just doesn't exist. And so therefore we're non-conforming, and that's how the planning board is able to approve different applications and permits. That's my
Right.
understanding. Incorrect, Hans, please. Correct me.
But you do have, trees and bushes and everything where possible, even along your driveway, which is almost impossible. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there are exceptions to this, and there are people that don't have 50 feet. They may not even have 10 feet, and that's understandable, but we have to somehow come up with an ordinance that will allow for that.
I agree with you.
If we talk about the blue sky idea, really why don't we talk about what an ultimate buffer is so that everybody understands what that is? And then maybe we go from there. I mean, so the minimal thing would be a lawn, which really doesn't do much. And by the way, I have worked with people to do only a lawn. In the end, they've hated it and are starting to plant. And maybe that's what we have to do, take this slow step with everyone. But the ultimate buffer has many layers. It has tall trees, which, by the way, if people have cut them away already, we have to encourage them to plant new trees for the future. It also has perennials. It has a mid-story of middle-sized trees. It has perennial bushes. And then it has ground cover and something called duff, which is that leaf and pine leaves that fall on the ground. So having all of these levels helps the rain fall slowly to the earth and get absorbed by the various roots that are below and keep the water from rushing into the lake. So if we wanted to talk about an ideal buffer, that's what that would be.
But couldn't you write an ordinance that says that the area is 50 feet and it can be reduced by these factors? It reduced if the slope is less than a certain, if it's a flat area, it could be reduced by, and as I understand it, there's like 3 different kinds of buffers. And the more buffers you put in, the more you can reduce the area of that's required. I mean, I think you could come up with some ordinance to that effect. And I think you can get by if it's, I don't know, we have to look into the grandfather, but I think based on an emergency and environmental optimization here, we could get by the grandfather. That's my instinct is. But I think an ordinance could be put together that would account for all these concerns.
That would be the goal. Charlie Bader, what do you think about this? Oh, you're on mute. We can't hear you, Charlie. Now you're gone.
Nope, there it is.
There he is.
Still muted,
You're on
still
mute.
muted.
Muted, Charlie.
Still muted.
No, can't hear a word.
Can't hear you.
Still got the red unit on.
Oh, does he?
Yes.
Yeah,
He's got his glasses on now, that's a good step.
that's progress.
Just a minute, okay.
Which finger was that?
Unmute. The
There
phone.
There you are.
I have a new phone, so I'm learning Zoom on it. Sorry about that. And I've just been skiing, which is anyway why I'm here. But I kind of think both and. I like the idea of thinking big and fixing the problem, which I think, you know, if you look at it from 100 years, these things are slow processes. And ideally you'd revegetate all the shorelines. But I also think that, you know, starting small and getting a beachhead is practical. And I think kind of like Jana's idea of explaining why at the same time that you're asking, no matter what we ask for, we're likely to get a compromise. So I think understanding that, and this could be a multi-year process, is you know, getting a beachhead's important, and that would be a big change in the status quo. And you know, we could, you know, we also need to take this conversation to other towns, I'm thinking, in the long term. So, but I think this is a process, and I agree with most of what's been said on both sides of that.
Okay. So considering that we're gonna compromise probably with the planning board, maybe with the select board. If we want 50 feet, we should ask for 100 feet. I mean,
Or 75.
well, now see, you're already compromising with me, but
But I think 100 feet is the goal. I think, you know, reestablishing the 100-foot buffer, and you know, catching all the upstream water is important. And they figure, if you, according to all the watershed planning that we've been doing for 10 years now, they figure we've kind of doubled the external load to the lake. And, you know, we're never going to get back to pristine conditions, but, you know, we've got roads, we've got camps, we've got houses. But if we can dial it down significantly, you know, that would be a good thing.
Yep. And the 100 feet, that is why the setbacks are set to 100 feet.
right.
In theory, if you're conforming, you have a 100-foot buffer.
Yes, that's the case. I mean, we have a new house here and we've got 100 feet.
And 100 feet was compromised. But, you know, I was looking at Jen's talk about buffers this morning. And, you know, if you really want, you know, wildlife, everything else, you're looking at multiple 100 feet. So, you know, we're not asking for the moon. We're asking to establish where it is possible, and you got to be practical. You know, what's required of everybody else. Why not? Now, if you've bought a house with a lawn in mind, you're not going to like it. And so that's why I was thinking grandfathering and anyway.
No, we can't grandfather. There are too many places now with big lawns down at the lake, and they're a big part of the problem. If we grandfather.
Well, that's what I was saying, kind of like taking away the grandfathering. And then the question is do you do it in now, or do you do it over, you know, 30 years from now when the property changes hands?
You could set the no-mow zone limit to 10 feet with the stipulation that in 10 years, it's going to go up again to 25 feet or something.
I think that's not a bad approach either.
Increase it.
Yeah.
Or you could have incentives. Like if you have a full 100-foot buffer, you get X off your property tax or something like that. Do the carrot and the stick.
There are things.
It's tough sell. It's like board.
What was
One
that?
very,
Wow.
I just want to say one very left field idea is almost creating a stormwater district within within rural areas. They have them in cities. There's none in rural areas in the state. And you could say within the shoreland zone, if you have a great buffer, you don't have, you get zero extra tax. If you have a lawn, you have, you're contributing to something that the town is putting money into. It creates a water quality fund. There's another way to possibly generate money to help fix problems and get the message across and reinforce good behavior.
Be like a carbon tax, except a phosphorus tax. You
Yep.
get taxed for however much phosphorus you're exporting into the lake.
And there's a legal structure in Maine to do that through the stormwater stuff that's going on in cities. They have a stormwater, essentially tax, depending on your impervious surface.
What's the structure again, Charlie?
Pardon?
What is the structure for that?
Bangor and Auburn have that. So I don't know. I've talked to people at state about it, but it's kind of, I was waiting for a time like this to bring it up. So, I think there's, again, that's a long-term possibility of trying, and that also puts some of the burden on people who are actually contributing to it. So it's not shared throughout, the rest of the town, and it creates another fund to fix problems.
And then who makes the determination that particular properties qualify, so to speak, for contributing to that fund? That's the CEO?
Yeah, it's going to require an administrative overhead. Yep. So it's not, but we could look at something like the Auburn stormwater ordinances and see how that it has to be a legal structure because of the taxing authority. And, so we could look at that as a model to, can this be adapted to a rural area? Is it practical? I'm just throwing that out there for other ideas of the documents that went around the last week are very helpful. And anyway, I don't want to monopolize. So I wanted to share that idea. We could look into that. But I think that's more of a long term. I think short term, getting something started and getting the conversation started is really good. And if we end up with 10 or 25 feet at the end of it, that's a great start, I think.
Yeah, and to get through the process of planning board and select board, we probably have to start out with something more like 100 and say we're trying to follow what's in there for the 100. I mean, you're not supposed to cut within that 100. So we already have it to an extent in there. So maybe we need to say that you can't be grandfathered into having lawns or non-vegetative areas within that 100 feet. Maybe it's something like that. I just, to get it complicated, I could see that you would score a property and based on the like lawns or bare dirt or whatever like that, and then say, okay, your score means that you pay 40% more in property tax. But there's always games that are played in that, and I'd be more reticent to do that than to just say, we're instituting a buffer on the lake at 100 feet, and you need to file for a variance or something if you don't have that 100 feet, or then we have to figure out, okay, what is the compromise with individual properties, because that makes perfect sense. There's a lot of properties that just don't, they can't do 100 feet. They don't have 100 feet, and but they can't ignore this problem.
I would suggest that we look into the legality of any grandfathering by is there the municipal association that we can go to, or what source do we have to get an opinion on that?
Well, there is the Maine Municipal Association.
I think we should, because, I think
And
that's,
the town's a member, so as long as it's a town official, they'll answer a legal question.
well, I think one of us needs to look into that, because that's critical to all our thinking here.
I mean, whether we can require existing properties to change as opposed to
New development.
strictly new development or properties that are changing hands.
Right.
Yes, okay.
Well, even changing, well, it's not a deeded right to have a lawn, so, but that's a good, I think you're absolutely right, is getting a legal opinion sooner rather than later is a good idea.
We really need an example of, I mean, this language has been written someplace in the country. You have to assume that there's a lot of lakes and a lot of regulation on them. So, we just need to find somebody that can find that.
Actually, before you signed on, when we were talking here briefly, Auburn, the town of Auburn is just now in the process of redoing their shoreland zoning to do very much the sort of thing we are, because they're quite concerned about water quality in Lake Auburn, which
Right.
they use as a drinking water source. And Jen Jesperson had mentioned that to me when we actually corresponded by email, and said that she would get me information on what they were doing, but has not done that yet. I will jog her on that, see what they are up to. They may have already figured this out.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, and they're also kind of leaders on this stormwater district.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Charlie, with that stormwater district also, it seems to me that would apply to camp roads. There was Hans and I've talked and others, that a lot of the water's coming, especially this year, we're seeing enormous amounts coming down camp roads, flowing right through, right to the lake, or amongst 200 or 300 feet back.
I mean, you can apply it to, the whole sort of road stream infrastructure. So, because that's really what we have to tackle if we really want to stop dirt.
Right, but is that, that would be a separate, conversation about, on our list here about, roads and ditches and things like that, so.
Yeah,
that's a separate-
but you could have that, it would provide incentives to maintain those roads as well if you were to, pursue that idea. I think it wouldn't, I mean, you could start in the shoreland zone, but you have to, also plan for these other ways that, dirt gets in the lake.
Right.
And there's a lot of that, as you know, you look at all the, the plumes of sand getting in the lake, and, and the phosphorus is, heading in the same direction. So.
Right. And those are coming from streams that are entering the lakes?
And the streams and ditches and culverts, and, there's a lot of drainage that's funneled to the lake. They use streams when they're available, and they just, send it, downhill if they're not available. So, in fact, we like it to go through the woods whenever possible, because you were talking about lawns earlier. The conservative estimate is you get 5 times the phosphorus off a lawn versus a forest. So, that right there is your argument for 100-foot buffers.
Right. Okay. Let's see, so Hans, did you have some thoughts that about enforcement that you wanted to talk about?
Don't want to talk about it. I have ideas. Pinkham Cove jumps right into mind. You got a lot of small lots. They're postage stamp lots. They're 50% lawn because people park their cars on them. And they want to the kids will be able to play croquet. I mean, so there's limitations that I don't think this is a one size fits all solution. You know, you can't just say, we're gonna commandeer 10 feet around the lake, because Christian's point, that could be somebody's entire front yard. They couldn't walk out their front door without, you know, trampling on their buffer. So, and then there's the grandfathering thing. I really don't like that word ever, because it's an excuse. People use it as a crutch.
Right.
Who's gonna go talk to Mr. Alphon? You do that, Pickham's Cove.
I will.
I mean,
Thank you, Lenny.
We can find somebody to talk to the Alphons.
there's just so much, you know, if you wanna implement this, you're gonna have to go to your highly visible areas first. You can't attack the little people in the coves. You're gonna have to do your high profile properties. And they have to be the example.
I think that's a great point, but I think we can get some of those folks on board.
Yeah, and then the other thing is you talk about grandfathering vegetation, well, what about people who, you know, they've got tremendous decks and boat ramps and things that, real hard surfaces that go, where they have to eliminate the boat ramps that might be used by the neighborhood, they have to eliminate the deck that they've got. That's, you know, grandpa used to fish off it or whatever.
No, you know, it's grandfather's water quality. My grandfather's water quality when he built our camp in 1932 is a lot different than it is today. So, unfortunately, we can either get ahead of it or we can deal with algae blooms that grandfather never, my Grampy Bradley never dealt with a algae bloom, and you know, a lot of people were drinking out of the lake back in his day. So things change, and I think that rather than being behind, we need to get the ordinance out as far in front as we can. Otherwise, we're going to end up with, you know, once you get the internal load increasing more and more, you're going to have no control over it. Your buffers are not going to do what you want them to do. Isn't that, yeah, Lynn, you're nodding to that.
Yeah, once the internal loading starts happening,
You're
you have
stuck.
to do alum.
We're posted, Charles, we have internal loading and, our lake starts to get green, kind of late July every year. And gets greener all of August, so I'll tell you, the man is speaking the truth.
I think that maybe we have to write two ordinances, one for new properties. But we do have to consider, as a Lakesmart person, I can only tell you how frustrating it is to help people create buffers that are effective, that meet the standard, which I'm not going to go into that whole argument here. But just to say that every property is different. My property, I have a house that is, I don't think it's 15 feet from the lake, and I have another house that's 8 feet from the lake. I put a buffer in the whole way. I'm letting trees come up in front of it. It's the best that I could do. I need to be able, I have a small sliver of a path to get through between the buffer and my house. I'm doing all this ground cover. I have no lawn whatsoever. But I say this only to say that every property is different, and we do need to consider this. Because there's gonna be so many people that aren't gonna be able to do this, and they're not even gonna be able to understand what it is that they should do.
Well, I would think that we need to find language that will accommodate the compromises that you talked of, because there are other places that have big lawns sloping down to the water that can comply with a vegetative buffer. So,
Let's get a sense of what we're talking about in terms of percentages or ratios. In terms of properties along the lakes in Belgrade, what percentage of them would you say have good 100-foot setback of the buildings from the water.
And it's all, you can kind of make a graph that's gonna go with the year it was built. I mean, because historic like Pine Beach, beautiful beach area, people were right on the water, I mean,
Yeah,
and then the buffer, if you let it go too far, well, you create hazard trees. And the last thing you want is a tree falling down and uprooting your buffer. I mean, so there's a balance, and not everybody has space, the real estate where, all right, the house gets killed, we can rebuild it, but we can move it back. Not everybody has the real estate to
I
move it back.
understand, but can you say, what's you didn't answer the question though, what is the percentage of the camp's properties that have 100 feet?
I can't speak to that, I've never done the survey.
Okay, you don't
I don't
have an
think
impression,
there is one.
huh? You don't have an impression
I
whether
would
it's
say
half,
50%,
50%?
but that's, you know, just pulling something out of my pocket.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
If you boat around Messalonsky, you can see right away
mm-hmm,
at least 50%, right, is lawns. Some of them are huge, some of them are not huge.
right.
But there's lots of lawns. I don't know how many of them have 100. I don't think there's a survey of anything like that or any.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a survey, I'm just
Or
trying to get a
any-
sense.
Yeah, I wish we had it.
Yeah, okay.
I have an idea to kind of compromise. You could mandate the 10-foot no mow zone or X percentage of your lot depth. So if you only have 100 feet of lot, then you can't do 10-foot buffer because your house is going to be in the way, right? So you could write in the variance that way.
Yeah, percentage of the space you have between.
Yeah,
in front of
the percentage of the space between your house and the lake.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but again, then, like to Paul's point, slope comes into a factor, because
Mhm.
let's just say
Twins, yeah.
Christian's house is 20 feet from the house, water. 10 feet's a buffer, it's on a slope, well, you need 10 feet of stairs, I mean,
Yeah,
there's gonna be so much pushback that, you know, this might be the hill that this whole
Yeah.
ordinance dies on.
Right, most homes built before 1978 are gonna be right on the water,
Yeah,
Right,
and that's the majority of them. In Belgrade and Rome, as a realtor, I do it all the
Really?
time. And most, you pick a road, pick a Bina Point, you walk down there, it's right over here. You're gonna see them right on the water, they're hugged right up, so there's very little room to add more in many cases.
and people bought them for that reason, now you change the ordinance, and they're gonna say, well, I'm gonna lose property value.
Yeah,
Oh, well, the lake turns green, we're gonna lose property value, it always comes back to the dollar,
does.
so.
It does, but, I don't think if you have a camp that's down on the water, but you also have 100 or 200 frontage feet, what we're really talking about is, vegetate around your camp on the water or not if you can't do it. But the rest of your land should have a buffer to it. There's no excuse just because your property is, like my family's place has got 850 frontage feet in a boathouse, and it is mostly vegetative buffer, because you've got there are 3 houses that are on plus the boathouse that are on the water. But the rest of it is in pretty good shape from a phosphorus standpoint.
Is there a way to at all determine scientifically the amount of phosphorus that would come from a lot? I mean, can we look at this and say that if we were able to have, as we talked about, a part-time CEO dealing with shoreland, could a CEO go around, look at a property and say that this property is high impact with some kind of formula?
yeah, there are runoff coefficients for different land uses that are published. You also would look at the percent impervious surface, and you can calculate what depth of buffer you need for a specific percent impervious surface to treat the stormwater runoff. Those formulas do exist.
So if you weren't able to look at a property and we just said that, you know, these rules come into effect if it's a moderate impact, and we define it based on these percentages you're talking about. That could work, right? On an individual, we're now making progress.
Well, I think you'd end up,
You'd end up getting it, start getting a little complicated
right,
in terms of finger pointing at your neighbor. Why do I have to put in a buffer when he doesn't? And the math might complicate things. I think that would make sense if you're doing a stormwater utility or stormwater district where you're taxing people based on how much phosphorus they're outputting. But in terms of mandating how thick of a buffer you need, that might be a little bit harder to get people to go along with.
well, we talked about the tree, hole in the canopy concept of tree cutting and the formula and the points involved, and we decided that's too complicated. So to come up with an ordinance that speaks to coefficients and impervious surfaces and things like that, that might be right along the same lines of something that would end up causing a problem versus, let's say we want to have 100-foot setback and 100-foot buffer, and it doesn't matter if you've grandfathered your lawn. We're going to have to deal with it. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like if we compromise at this level, then, why bother? It's not going to help the lakes.
I just want to make a point of, thinking about the streams that are getting to the lakes and having buffers around them as well, because it matters. Yeah.
Yes, I think, and that would be already part of the shoreline.
It is
zone.
part of the shoreland zone officially, but, there's a lot of roads that intersect those streams.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know if we deal with that now or if that's a separate ordinance, but, if you've got, we have 75-foot setbacks on streams. And I don't know that we have anything specific where a culvert or, a bridge or something like that crosses a road and, any special treatment. And I mean, the town is also involved on Route 27 on the way, towards the town hall on the north side going south. You're crossing that bridge goes right over that stream that has that giant swamp now, which seems like the water level is higher than I've ever seen it. We might have to be working with the town Public Works Department to see about treating that crossing as being something special, because if they just sand it and salt it and don't be thinking about it, maybe that's having an impact. And that's just
Well,
one
I'm
example.
sure it is. When you drive around Boston, you see those signs about, basically telling the, plow operators to, slow down on the salting when you go through certain areas. And that may be appropriate in Belgrade, and it may be something that they, can be done verbally rather than signs, but, it's thinking about that and having the conversation about it, and then, is good.
Yeah.
I have a one time, and it is in the vegetative buffer list here. That seems like it's low hanging fruit, might be fairly easy. Maine state law only requires that you can't use fertilizers within 25 feet of most great bodies of water. And I absolutely know there are people who fertilize within that, but even those folks who are fertilizing a little bit back from that, to me, that was one of those, I think, a pretty easy one. I don't think there's a lot of pushback, but, having as part of our ordinance, a greater number, maybe in the entire shoreline zoning of 250 feet of no fertilizers. Now, the no chemical part, we'd have to be careful about, because if I got a hornet's nest and I'm allergic to bees, I'm still gonna go kill those hornets. I don't wanna say no chemicals. But certainly fertilizers on lawns, where I think you said in Messalonsky, it's 50% of what your guys' studies have shown,
Mhm.
contributes. Well, probably some of that is because people are fertilizing those
Right.
lawns, not just the clippings or whatever, or the fact that it's not absorbing runoff.
Right.
It probably has some amount, and I don't know the numbers because I don't have a study, but the state only says 25 feet, and I feel like that could probably be easily extended, and I don't think there'd be a lot of pushback. And then, of course, it takes education afterwards, but, that seems like low hanging, easy fruit, that we could pick, but I don't know what anybody else thinks on that.
I agree. I think it's a great,
Yeah.
to have something tangible that we can start with is a great idea.
Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it might be very hard to enforce. If you have a lawn, if you're allowing a lawn within the 100-foot buffer and you're saying you can't fertilize it, you have to catch them fertilizing it. I mean, wouldn't that,
Yeah, I mean, and that's always been an issue with neighbor turning in neighbors kind of thing, and sometimes it's valid.
Yeah.
And sometimes the neighbor just doesn't like another neighbor, and that's the way to cause him grief. I know all about that. Good point, but if people know that there is an absolute ordinance on it, some people might not fertilize then. I mean, we also have speed limits that say don't go 50, more than 50, and everybody's going 60, I get it, but it's still, we should at least have it. Doesn't mean that it's easily enforced, I realize that.
All of this is gonna be very difficult to enforce.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what we can enforce. What I've been, by the way, I've been going to town meetings for years, trying to get something like this off the ground, and I've never been able to get the select board to say, well, you gotta tell us how we're gonna enforce this. We have no idea how we're gonna enforce this. They were very interested in it. They wanted to do it, but nobody could figure. So this is a wonderful thing. I think we do need to take what's tangible. I don't think we can worry about what we can enforce. We can try to enforce as much as we can. We can use Lake Smart. We can build up Lake Smart, which is, going around slowly from house to house. That could be part of our enforcement. We could mention Lake Smart in our information. We could make some mandates, and then we could also maybe make some suggestions within our mandates or after our mandates to explain to people what the ultimate buffer looks like.
John just raised an interesting point about Lake Smart. I hadn't thought about this. Now, the Lake Smart program is, run, there are so-called hubs around the state. There's the hub in this area is actually just up the road here, at Seven Lakes. And, there are groups that work on Lake Smart in the 3 lake associations in Belgrade. But there's no reason why, I don't think there is a reason why, the town could not also have someone who is actively involved in Lake Smart. And that could also do, Lake Smart evaluations and give, Lake Smart certificates and so forth. What do you think about that, Lynn? If the town were interested, would that be a possibility? I don't know that we could accept, maybe we could put it in the ordinance that something about the town and Lake Smart. We'll see. It's something to sort of think about for a while. Not that anyone would be required to work up to Lake Smart standards, but that we would sort of put that in as
As a reference.
as a reference, and as kind of the sort of ultimate goal, if that would be out there. So.
I like that, and I also like to see people lose their Lake Smart plaque if they fall out of compliance.
That's a great
Oh.
idea.
Well,
Take that trophy away.
We're having that discussion actually right now.
well, I heard from the folks on Bar Lake, who do Lake Smart, which is, Kim and Dave, back last year, that there was some discussion about having people have to renew it every 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, we're, we are, we're
Lenny,
Lakes
Lenny, was there discussion at the comprehensive planning meeting the other night with Anthony Wilson was suggesting that perhaps Lake Smart should be a requirement in certainly the policy of comprehensive plan to implement that in the shoreline zone. Wasn't that discussed the other night?
Yeah, he brought that up. Again, I think it's one of those things would have to be a kind of goal is the wrong word. I can't think of the right word, just, it's kind of a vision of what people should aspire to, but I don't think that we could, to try to require everyone to achieve it within a certain amount of time, is both unrealistic and I think, just an impossibility.
Yeah.
It is. In fact, the standards are very high.
Yeah.
Very
So,
high.
On the two-pager discussion topics and ideas for changes, the last item is property tax discount for properties with Lake Smart certification. So then you create a carrot and stick for Lake Smart, but I personally don't think that's aggressive enough. I think if we need to do something that mandates that Lake Smart is, and my house is Lake Smart certified. It's all about the buffers and the runoff and stuff like that, as far as I can tell. And we're talking about that and beefing up the ordinance to accomplish, so it would basically, if we do our job and beef up the ordinance, then we don't, Lake Smart almost becomes moot. If somebody is not violating their ordinance, they're probably Lake Smart certified.
I disagree, Chris. In the sense that I don't think that there's any reasonable possibility that we could write an ordinance that would accomplish that for a couple of reasons. One is, as a point that Hans made a few minutes ago, every property is different. And I think there's a lot of flexibility within Lake Smart where it's very kind of goal oriented in terms of achieving, keeping runoff, phosphorus laden runoff out of the lake. And so they have that goal and then they adapt it to the reality on the ground, so to speak. And that's very hard to write into an ordinance. So I think there's that problem. There's just every different property is so different, both in topography and in where the buildings are located on the property. And the other is just getting it passed, getting the planning board, the select board, and the population to approve this. I think I'm not advocating little tiny steps, but I think if we push it too far, that we're going to get too much pushback, and it just, we'll be sorry. I think we need to take kind of a middle ground, at least to start.
Lenny, what would that middle ground look like? Just, would that be, a smaller buffer?
Well, I mean, I like the idea. I think Charlie earlier said in his first comment said he liked this too, if I understood it correctly. And that was the idea of either a no-mow zone of whatever the length would be, or a buffer, a more traditional kind of buffer with trees and shrubs and duff, at least as a start.
Yeah.
I really like Lynn's idea of a relatively short buffer of maybe 10 feet or something, but initially, and maybe not right the first year, but going into effect in 2 or 3 years. And then after another 10 years, that gets extended. And maybe the more traditional buffer also starts relatively short, maybe 25 feet, and then again after another 10 years gets extended. So something like that. I see it's more of a middle ground.
Grow into it, right?
Yeah, grow into it a little bit. Yeah, rather than hitting people hard right initially. I think you get less pushback. But I also think that knowing a little bit about the voting population of the town, most of the people with the shorefront that will be affected by this, or a lot of them anyway, can't vote.
Can't vote.
And a lot of people, especially if you try to if we try to do a little bit of a code education or a bit of a campaign about it, and try to explain that this is part of what this is all about, is to help keep the property values along the lake up, so that for the folks who don't have lakefront property, their taxes stay down. That can help get people to vote in favor of it. So, people who don't have shorefront property don't have any reason to vote against it. That's my opinion. We'll see, but I'm a terrible political prognosticator, so.
I have another, for another kind of moderate approach is doing it with, with people when the property changes hands. Maybe having not enforcing, but requiring a higher standard when property changes hands. So, for property owners that are there now that bought with a certain vision in mind, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 25 feet, maybe it's 50 feet, whatever we come to as a recommendation. People, when that property changes hands, require 100 feet or require 50 feet. That might be 10 years from now, might be 30 years from now, but little by little, we could have this come into effect essentially.
Do we have time? We've already seen algae blooms on East Pond and North Pond. Do we have time to wait?
I think that's a fair question. Right now in Great Pond, probably. But but again, that's an all hands on deck kind of thing, looking at septic and looking at roads and everything else. Because the weather's changing, as we know.
Right.
So, I keep coming back to like smaller communities like Pinkham's Cove and Pine Beach, where you've got little lots, and to start, I would think like 10 foot or 10%, the greater of 10 feet or 10%.
Lynn's
of your
percentage
depth.
idea, yeah.
And then, the whole change of ownership concept, I would see realtors suffering from that because, somebody's gonna buy a property, the realtor's gonna have to disclose this,
Yes,
or they're gonna get sued.
it's gonna be up on the property disclosure.
Because
Probably
they're
about
buying
a
it
grand
for
a
you,
whole
they want for what they bought, well, they want that, but then, you can't keep that, you bought it, but now you have to change it.
We
Yeah,
can do it.
I don't see it working.
He says we can do it.
Okay.
What I wanna see is when people change property, all I see is they cut down trees. Boom, I want a 180-degree view of my lake. So I'd like to just see that stuff.
But that's already against, most.
It's against all the rules and people do it.
Right.
I've seen
But you're
it.
thinking more enforcement, which I think we've heard. I guess Lynn's presentation was that the difference in Rome versus Belgrade, was the perception of enforcement. Is that right, Lynn? Was that in your presentation?
Yeah, the regulations aren't any stronger. They're just have a longer history of enforcing them.
Right.
To follow up on that, I agree with you. I think the underlying issue in anything we present is going to be, can it be enforced? And because we don't have a viable way to enforce it, we're not going to make much progress. So I think we have to devote some time to how we can enforce this. And we have spoken in the past about trying to promote a second CEO that's seasonal, number one. And this is just my crazy future thinking, that maybe this committee could segue into some kind of a board, like a planning board, a permitting board that would deal with the vegetated buffer. We are the Lake and Natural Resources Committee. And you gotta come before us to get permits in certain, and we would work with the seasonal CEO as an enforcement officer. But I think you're gonna be headed that way. If we can't come up with a way to enforce this, then we're just, we're not gonna go anywhere.
Well, the good thing about a buffer is you can view it from the lake, so you could just canoe around the lake and find all the violators pretty easily.
Right. Paul, I think to your point, we cannot expect the town of Belgrade to do more with the same resources on it. And what I would say is that we need to make an argument right up front when we present this to planning board and select board to say the town needs to put a higher priority on enforcement on the lake, which means more resources. And the property taxes of Belgrade are paid something like 80% by shoreland zone properties. And the lakes are such a bedrock, or the central part of the value of the economy in Belgrade and the tax base in Belgrade, that we think that it's essential that more resources be devoted to in the enforcement would be, to the water quality, and enforcement is what we think might be something. If we're going to create a more aggressive ordinance, we need to back it up with more resources.
Exactly. Just for your information, before you came on our committee, we made this effort to, when the new CEO came on, we went to the select board, we being the committee, like it was just then the Lake Committee, to ask the Lake Committee to expand the hours of the CEO and to put it into their budget. We made a whole presentation, we wrote a letter, put a lot of time into it. And this effort we need to continue to have part of our thinking, whatever it goes, but we need to continue. As Lynn said, Rome had better enforcement, and there's been a huge change in Belgrade from the Fuller days to the Rasmussen days.
Right.
Plus, it's a big educational, kind of, effort too, yeah. But how are we gonna get the word out, teaching them that all the Lake Smart procedures, having been a Lake Smart evaluator before, you spend a lot of time in each property in dealing with them.
Oh, yeah.
And you get,
Yeah.
and you really get a sense of that property, how the people live on it, what their lifestyle is.
Also, as Friends Methalonsky, a lot of the articles we're writing now are trying to educate people about how phosphorus gets into the lake. We're taking little pieces of it. So, but I think education is a big piece of it.
Yeah,
Because I thought there was gonna be huge, there were times when I could not give people awards. I really wanted to. I'm telling you, you think it's hard to do. I can't even give an award to somebody I think should get one, because the standards are so high and rigid, actually, I think too
Yeah.
rigid in certain
that's
ways.
what kind of, I thought, I was doing it 218, 216.
Yeah,
218. And it'd be close, and they were trying so hard to make it really work. They had to post something they cherished, or whatever it was.
well, or
Add
plant
something
something.
more in
Yeah.
space I liked.
But what I find is that people really want to know this, and once
Yeah.
they know it, they're very happy to do what's right. And they were less offended. I gave them what did I give them? Some sort of other award.
Yes.
But,
Participation award.
it really is more about education. It really is about understanding what needs to be done. So as a town office, we could publish articles, we can, there are a bunch of things that we could do to educate the community.
Right, and I think what Chris is saying, we can't use how we're doing it now for the future, because the future is away from us with our elect board, if we don't act and some changes. Really tough ones there. If people want to be here and enjoy it, they're gonna. It can't be like it's forced, it's gotta grow into it, and that's the
Yeah.
education piece, neighbor to neighbor piece, outreach, meetings, information, but it's good, but Given that we need to do it, it has to be a, you know, kind of a big circle then.
I might see an avenue to get to where we wanna be, but it can't hit it head on.
Yeah.
You know, it's. You know, Lynn and Stewart, the Lake Smart people, they all get out and see a lot of different properties. And they see a lot of violations. Seven Lakes Alliance is a fundraising organization. They can't be the dark horse of the neighborhood looking at properties. Or they're gonna lose all their funding. But at the same time, they're seeing this stuff. Even if it's not the property they go to, they might see it at the neighboring property or somewhere around. And, you know, a lot of it is, you know, like your analogy of highway speeders. It's having the resources in the right place to see what you want to catch the violations. Yeah, and code enforcement requires certification from the state. So finding somebody part-time, seasonal, to go get certified and just work in the summertime, that's, you know, you can hardly get volunteers at the boat landing, you know, never mind someone that's gonna go around and be hated by the neighborhood. So, again, I see information needs to be brought to this office in a discreet manner by people, you know, it is some neighbors telling on neighbors a lot of the times. And, that's just the nature of it. You know, they get angry, they don't wanna see it, but they don't wanna confront their neighbor. And I would not ask Seven Lakes Alliance to confront people because their job is to raise money and serve the environment at the same time. And we have to respect what their mission is. So. I think,
I guess their mission would be more the educational mission, you know. And also our, you know, advisory to this committee and the town, and what are the, what we're doing now, what are the best practices, what can be effective? How can we get there? We don't, maybe we can't start off at, you know, 100%, but we start off at 15 or 20 and work up. These are all things that we're just talking about today.
but again, somebody made the point that most of the violations you see from the water, I guess it was Lynn with a canoe. While you're out there watching the sunset, you know, nobody wants to see you walking around with a clipboard taking notes while you're having a martini, whatever.
Yeah, you can see
That's
pretty
where it
much.
starts, because most properties waterfront, you can't see from the road.
No, it's looking at the water is a lot easier. You see them.
So when there's an
That's right.
astonishing change, just say, hey, was there a permit for this, you know? Put the attention to this office, because, you know, it's gotta start somewhere.
Well, I think we start with with changes to the ordinance that tries to get us where we want to go. And I think we can, I guess that since we're running very low on time now, I would say the next task is for somebody to find some examples of ordinances that other lakes have crafted that would fit perhaps what we're trying to do. And I still would say I would be more comfortable presenting 100-foot buffer and having it cut back to 25 or 50 or 25, rather than coming in with a 25-foot buffer, or 10-foot buffer and saying, well, now we're not going to do that. So I guess I'd want to see what's out there in the world of ordinances and see what would fit. And then we'd also have examples to point to say, look at these lakes have done this. We can't pretend that that our lakes are not gonna deteriorate. And we need to take action. So we want to follow the lead of these lakes where they've tightened up their.
The lead of these towns.
Yeah, I think a ban on shoreline zone for fertilizers, I think that would apply. I think you just do it all shoreline zone, no fertilizer, but then you have to come into definitions as Miracle Grow, the fertilizer.
Oh, sure,
So
absolutely.
if you're pouring that into your potted plants, are you a violator?
I think you are violating it, yeah.
They're within the shoreline zone, I guess you are.
And the state has like a definition that I was reading on there. It's not real detail, but it does talk about the different types and not having phosphorus in it at certain times of year, and where sometimes a year you can, but if they do sell it in the local store, they've got to have a posting and blah, blah, blah. But they don't talk about like all the details of, like, are you talking about a flower pot that you have sitting out there, or is it the ground? They didn't get into any of that. I don't know. I just feel like that's a pretty simple one to just say.
Surface
don't use it.
fertilizer.
Surface fertilizer. And to me, I don't know how you define fertilizer exactly. They didn't really, and at least in that part that I read, they didn't say what does qualify as a fertilizer. I mean, is it because you had a pigeon fly by and poop in the yard? No, but it's something you did. So I don't know what that definition is, but I've seen people doing it, and I'm on my boat cruising around and I see one big huge one in Sydney that's like 400 or 500 feet, goes up all the way down. And the guy's out there with his little spreader right down by the water. I'm like,
I know that.
yeah, and yeah, it's huge, and it goes up, you know, a mile. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do that, and it was, Friends of Messalonsky sent out one of the little things, and I was reading it, and it talks about the 25-foot zone.
Yeah.
And I said, well, he definitely violated that, but it seems to me, if you're spreading surface fertilizer, that like, it just, with one rainstorm, that's all washing in the lake.
Oh, it's very steep.
And if that's a steep one,
Yeah.
right, that's why it's so green, but meanwhile, I feel like there's certain easy things that I don't think anybody would really have a problem with, frankly, and that's one of them. Meaning, ban that within shoreline zoning,
Period.
you know, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's some heartburn there.
I mean, I think it's a place to start. Yes, violators are gonna occur, but the honest conscience will prevail for, I would like to think at least half of those people.
Right, and they just, frankly, when they know they're not supposed to, then they read it and like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, I never thought of that, you know? But then the guy who still wants to do it probably is out there doing it, and maybe somebody then, takes some pictures of them and sends it in to someone, but that's Sydney, so we don't have any say on that one, but I do also think, is anybody gonna ask, one of our town officials, meaning select board, to get a legal opinion?
I will,
Grandfather rules?
yeah, I have an in with one of the select board members.
All right, well, I didn't know if somebody was gonna actually do it or not.
Yeah, I will ask her, yes.
What's that, Lenny? What are you gonna ask her?
Whether or not to inquire, whether we can inquire of MMA, Maine Municipal Association, whether or not it is permissible, to require, to change shoreland zoning in such a way that someone who is currently conforming, but would then, after the change, would be non-conforming, whether they would then be required to make a change. So for example, if we were to write into that is to say, we would essentially not be grandfathering, is it kosher to not grandfather properties for something like, I mean, for example, if we were to put into our proposed new ordinance that you're required to have a 10-foot no-mow zone. No-mow zone. Could properties that currently are not doing that be required to do it? Or could they claim, no, I'm grandfathered because I've been mowing this for the last 40 years?
Right.
That's the question.
Lenny, I
So
think that the usual course is to ask the town, Lenora D to do this. Whoever's got the relationship with the MMA.
Well, of course, no, I will ask her, well, yeah, that's true, but I will ask, I'll ask Barbara what the appropriate way, the appropriate way to get the answer to that question would be.
Okay,
So, yeah,
I want to just sum up. I mean, I think that we are the Lake and Natural Resource Committee. And if we're not going to be aggressive, who is? I mean, this
Right.
is our job to deal with water quality. So Chris, I go along with taking initially as strong a position as our committee can agree to.
Yeah.
And I think we got to look into enforcement. I like the idea of banning fertilizer right away.
right.
And so I think we have, to sum up, we should start trying to figure out what we can agree on and moving forward.
one other thing I will do, is contact, Sue Gallo, who is the head of, the organization Maine Lakes, used to be called Maine Lake Society, and see if there are any towns in Maine that she's aware of that have strong, have especially strong shoreland zoning. And see if if in fact there are, who they are and how to get in touch.
Right.
That'd be
And
great.
you could ask about the vegetative buffers with her
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay, sure, be happy to. Yeah,
And
I know her.
And then maybe, our next topic might be septic systems and, has somebody got an ordinance that is that they think is strict on that as well. So that's
Yeah.
that would be great.
Well, yeah, I'll give her a call and just talk to her about what we're doing and see if she has ideas.
Okay, it looks like we're out of time.
One thing, before we close, I'd like to just verify through Lynn, I think Rome has Belgrade beat on the shoreline zone ordinance within 25 feet in Rome, there's a no-touch zone, is that correct?
I have to double check. I'm not sure about that.
I think they have us beat, I think we need to adopt that portion of law.
We can't let Rome get ahead of us.
I see, I'm gonna shame you into it. All right,
Well, the idea here is for us to do something and then to try and get Rome to come along and go further, have Rome go further. Have Rome beat us.
well, I think we can get there.
I met with the Rome Lakes Committee, last month. At, Pete Callen asked me to go in and just tell them about what we're doing here, and they're very interested in what we're doing. They see the advantage of collaboration as we move forward to these things
Good.
in a big way. You know, 'cause
Uh-huh.
if we're doing something and Rome is doing a better practice, and we're not, the lake doesn't care, it's still gonna.
you also.
It'll get,
What about the other towns? What about like Oakland and Sydney?
Well,
yeah, they're,
I didn't talk to them yet. I can tell you that under the former town manager in Oakland, who is now in
I
Utah,
know.
there was very little interest, but maybe under the new town manager, that'd be Oakland.
Okay,
I don't know about Sydney.
I don't think Sydney has a town manager.
Yeah, yes, Sydney doesn't.
Yeah, their
So that's a-
select board manages the town.
Yeah.
it's like Rome.
Oh, but they're collaborative and they get involved, so we
Yeah.
can get Sydney involved, maybe.
It's
Always try.
It's who's on
That's right.
who's participating. And here Rome is very pro-environment. At least people participating on these boards and.
Well, and Seven Lakes Alliance did initiate a code enforcement kind of roundtable,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I heard that. How that,
which I think I can see where, again, we trade stories, how we dealt with situations and differences in our ordinances. It can be a great place to inspire some change.
great.
Good.
I was glad to hear about that.
Yeah, they did, I think it was a wonderful idea, and I think the first meeting went very well.
Right, I could foresee a time when we have the Rome Lakes Committee in here with us, and we're going through all the stuff and we'll go out, Oakland, if they have a similar one, we kind of just have to, once we get a little more focus on this, finish up these topics, then we can bring them in to share and
It's
get their
also
feedback.
the idea of focusing on the positive, so when I go around in my boat on Messalonsky, I'm not noticing the violators. I'm looking for people I can give an award to. I'm starting that way. So, because the more signs you put up, the more people talk about it and understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so sort of through the back way, you bring the others along.
Right.
Chris,
That's my goal this
Yeah.
year, anyway. We'll
yeah,
see.
that's a great way to do it and bring them on. Oh, for next meeting, Chris, do you have for Paul?
Pat, maybe you should mention this Main Lakes meeting on June 21st.
I don't have it in front of me here, but that's a one that,
It's in Farmington, right?
Yeah.
It's all day, starting at
it's a
9
great place to
a.m.
go. They'll resend the information out to everybody again, but it's a wonderful place, not only to hear the speakers, but to kind of
Connect.
talk to people who are doing it and really share stories.
Yeah,
I've been to a couple of them and it was very, very helpful.
The
I
early
bet-
bird, the early bird prices expires April 30th, so you have to register before that. I think it's
Yeah.
$40 for the day.
Right. Yeah, I just got another email from them. I don't see it, but yeah, so we can look into that.
I'm gonna go.
Oh, good. So Paul, you're out the next two meetings?
I am. Yeah, we need
Somebody
somebody.
to volunteer to be our scribe?
I can do it for May 7th, but I will also miss the May 21st meeting.
And I'll be out the May 21st meeting.
Is that? And we're,
Well, that's, we're
Just
missing
my
three
dog's
people, so maybe,
Maybe we'll skip.
you may be ready to skip that meeting. That's a real busy time for me anyway.
So maybe we'll skip the 21st meeting and just go and read. We want everybody here.
Maybe
Yeah,
two people left.
Yeah.
Everybody's busy.
So do we have enough people here for the 5-7 meeting?
I'll be here.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing else can.
Connie will be back. I wanted to be on this committee, but I was told that I couldn't,
We have an empty member.
I'm in California 4 months of the year. And so I would have to, I couldn't be here for all those meetings when that happened in the winter.
Could be on Zoom. That's how
I
I do.
I was told that wasn't sufficient.
You have to be, there's a difference between the ad hoc committee and the Lakes and Natural Resource Committees. One, all of us are Belgrade Lakes residents except, Belgrade residents except one. We have one out-of-state member, Paul.
One seat.
I'm a Belgrade
Seasonal.
resident. I just don't
Yeah, so
in the winter.
it doesn't,
Okay. I'm interested.
okay,
Yeah, I think we do have one vacancy, don't we?
yeah,
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 Really?
we do, yes.
All right.
Because we just
You
have
have to live in
one
Belgrade.
who,
I do.
she does.
she does, yes.
Oh,
she
great.
does.
Oh,
Yeah, she just, she winters out in California.
we have a lot of people on Zoom here, you could see.
I see. Okay.
Zoom's not a problem.
Great.
No, so well,
All right.
So moved.
we'll get you a application.
Okay. Thank you.
So anything for Chris for next meeting? You know, are we,
Will we get Dave, I forget his last name, here for next meeting, or is that?
I can get him there. But, you know, I've done a lot of work with him, but unfortunately, I can't be there. I'm gonna be.
Yeah, I know, he's really good. He'd be great to have either for the next time when we talk about septics, whether it's next meeting or the meeting after.
I can send some material around that he's generated ahead of him. Too.
Okay,
Well, I'll reach out to him and get back to you guys.
Dave
Okay.
Rhodes is gonna be presenting at the Seven Lakes workshop on Thursday. Yeah, on Thursday.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Seven Lakes is having a road workshop on Thursday,
Oh,
and Dave's gonna be one of the speakers there.
who is he? Okay. What's his last name again, remind me?
Roke?
CHE.
So are we saying that our next meeting on May 7th would be a deeper dive into septic? Is that what we're thinking?
Well, you can take the deep dive and I'll just wait for the report.
That was a joke.
That was a joke.
It was a
Anyway,
joke,
yes.
Lenny? Wow.
A deep you want to take a deep dive into the septic, go right ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead and dive away. Yeah,
that's a shitty idea.
that is a crappy idea.
Sorry, yes, yes.
So that's, so in all seriousness, are we May 7th as a septic focus on the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just a question I have as we go on, especially we've covered a lot with this, at some point we kind of, get a list of, that we could give to the town of, the recommendations we make on buffers, septic systems. So we'll have to come back to this to kind of,
Oh, of course, we haven't actually made like our decisions, we're waiting for some feedback on some other
Feedback.
areas, but
yeah,
at some point, we have to start saying.
we've got a
here's
lot of good stuff done
things
today.
that we've done.
Here's our recommendations for this topic.
Right.
and then-
Yes, then we'll wrap up that.
Okay,
Good, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for being here.
great to see you all.
Chris, how are you doing? How's your hip?
It's good. It's actually, I had my knees done 3 days apart about 5 years ago, and that was very tough, but so far it's pretty good. It doesn't hurt much at all. I've been following my protocol, but take out the old and put in the new. It's about a 2-hour operation maybe. So not bad. I recommend it to everybody.
Okay.
Right after.
Okay. well,
Thank you all.
hope you all
Great.
better.
See you, May 7th.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, second.
Bye, all.
Yeah.
Did everybody vote for that?
I
You
vote.
did. Thank you all.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good night, folks.